Okay, Mr. Trundy,
Thank you.
you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Good morning. Attorney Christopher Trundy for the defendant in the trial court and petitioner here, Roger Chandanais. This is a request for review, and Mr. Chandanais is asking you to enter a required finding of not guilty based upon the sum of the Commonwealth's case that was presented at trial. By way
Now,
of
these
back,
marijuana plants are growing right outside the house. In fact,
at least one of them was, yes.
One of them's 4 feet tall, and you can see it from the bathroom window.
That's not in the record.
It's not?
It's not in the record that you could see. There's no testimony about what you could see.
It's in the
through
record
bathroom.
that it was under the bathroom window and that it was 4 feet tall.
On the back side of the house, under the bathroom window.
Now, Mr. Chandanais owns some of the property on which these...
That is not in the record.
Not?
No.
47 marijuana plants?
Yes. Well, there's a slight variation between the three officers who testified. But yes, there were 47 plants spread over a large commercial property. And in fact, the record...
I thought a detective testified that he knew the defendant owned the land surrounding the property, including the land behind the garage, because of other previous incidents on the property.
And if you see, there was a sidebar with the judge of voir dire on that matter, and the judge had me re-question him. And I asked him if he had any personal knowledge as to who owned the property, and he said no.
So, all right.
In fact, I don't think it makes any material difference, quite frankly. But the record is what it is, which is that there was this informant report of plants growing at the property, that based upon that, a request for a search warrant of the home at the front of the property, which is on a main road, was requested, as well as outside buildings. At the time, July 30th, 2002, when the warrant was executed, some roughly, it's unknown how many officers, some 12 or more officers and some 5, 7 or more cars descended upon the property and split up into at least 2 separate groups. One group was sent to the big commercial garage out back. This is a property that services buses. It's a bus depot. And so roughly half the group, as far as we can tell, was sent out back to secure that area. It was never discussed in the search warrant affidavit or anything. And part of the group went to the home. There's a dispute that's in this record and predates the trial as to the must-knock provision of the warrant that's not before you, but in any event, there's some time between 5 seconds and 2 minutes after allegedly announcing that they were the Westport police, the door of the house was knocked in, and Mrs. Chandanais, who's an 81-year-old woman who was sitting there watching television, was confronted with some 7, 8 officers who then went through her entire house and turned it over, and they found a bag of fireworks. Mr. Chandanais was not.
Could you tell me, now, there were some plants that someone was cultivating, apparently.
Well, let me address
You're
that on
gonna
the
get
record.
to
That's-
that? Where were these plants located?
Okay, that's a pretty important issue here. The testimony is that there was an officer, Thatcher, who did not testify at trial, who headed back behind this commercial garage. So you have the house, you have a big area, which can be seen in some of the photographic evidence where the trucks can be moved around and buses can be turned around. You then have this large commercial garage, and then somewhere at a minimum in the record of 150 feet into the woods, that's at a minimum, there's some variation of the different officers, is found a piece of mesh. That appears as a photograph number 20. It's attached as an addendum separately. It's also in the main appendix, but it's in the red brief. And it shows a wire mesh circular on its side in a deep bed of overgrown vegetation. What the second officer who testified, Detective Arrington, said was that he was called by Thatcher to come back to that area. And what he did is he headed 100 feet east of the property, behind the building. No one knows what the property lines are. Followed a cart path, a tractor path, alongside farmland, and then came back in another 100 It went down 150 feet minimum. At one time, it was longer. I questioned him about his prior testimony, where it was several hundred feet. And then came into an area he described as a clearing in the woods. It is cited in the red brief that he indicated there were plants there. I asked him specifically the question, which is not mentioned in the red brief, at page 105, I believe, of the record, whether or not there were any actual plants there when he arrived. I'm sorry, that's page, 105. And on page 105, he said, well, I don't remember, actually, I'm not sure. Now, Lieutenant Bell, who's the third person who testifies, his job was to photograph all of these plants, and he's the guy who's called over and taking pictures. He's asked extensively about where he was brought to photograph plants. The only place behind the building that he testifies to is 20 yards directly behind the back of the building, and as part of the area surrounding the building. He does not describe going back. He takes that photograph. There are no photographs of any plants back there. I had asked the first officer, Officer Sullivan, whether or not he had put in a report that this mesh was consistent, in his opinion, with cultivation activities to keep small animals away. That was the question at page 50 that's alluded to by the Commonwealth. So when you look at the evidence, there is no evidence in the record that there were actual plants there. The suggestion is that in the opinion of Officer Sullivan, who's the lead officer, that he thought this mesh could have been consistent with cultivation. Which
How many people lived in the house? Was that
Four.
Four?
Yes.
The defendant, his
wife, and...
his wife's 81, you said?
Yes, the defendant at that
How
time
old
was
is he?
79.
79.
The wife is 81. They have an adult retarded daughter who lives there, and then there was another daughter who's listed, and I'm not sure if she was actually living there on a daily basis at that time. There are also, as the record shows, a lot of other activity going on, and Officer Sullivan admits that this was used by other people. There's a universe of other people, which we never even explored at trial.
So your contention is, number one, these plants may not even have been on his property.
No,
Were they on his property?
well-
Did he own the house?
he's a title owner. In fact, it's not in the record. It's not
That's
the
not
evidence
in
at
the
trial.
That's not in the evidence?
It is not, no title. I asked specifically of Officer Sullivan whether or not he determined the title. And
Well,
he's-
whether he owned it or not,
I don't
he
think it
lived
matters.
there, right?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
He did.
He was in control of it.
That's a different issue. Because the property immediately behind the house is really used by a number of people. Well, let me just address one issue here. The first thing that a jury would have to find is that somebody was actually cultivating these plants. And there's no evidence in the record of cultivation of the actual plants that were pulled out of the ground.
What do you mean?
Well-
I mean, somebody had to plant them,
Yes.
didn't they?
Where's the evidence of that in the record? There's nothing in the record that...
They don't
that
grow
Spontaneously grew?
Well, this is an area, well, it's not in the record. The record has 3 police officers. Each one testifies that they have a minimal amount of training. 2 of them testify that part of their training with their 2-week program and their academy is the identification of pot plants, that they actually had to learn how to identify them. There's no testimony about what it takes to cultivate them, whether or not these can be naturally occurring, whether or not there's...
Isn't that within anybody's experience, that anybody who plants flowers or has ever seen them grow? Plants don't just grow spontaneously.
I don't
numbers
accept
like
that,
that.
Your Honor. I think that they have to show that somebody actually planted these. First, you have to show there's a crime, that someone planted them. Secondly, you have to show that Mr. Chandanais was involved in that. So there's nothing in the record, there's no horticultural evidence that suggests that these weren't either the byproduct of somebody else's activity. They're all over the property. And if you look at the photographs, they're mixed in with weeds everywhere.
Yeah, but how tall are the other weeds? Are the other
The ones behind the house, that's the southern exposure. So there's a row. You can see it right in the picture. There's a row of them. They're all roughly the same size.
a row of weeds or a row of
Weeds. And in one is that one plant that they make the main issue of, which is the plant behind the house. Now, the entrance to the house is on the side. There's no entrance back.
I mean, that's the one under the bathroom window?
Yes. If you look at the photograph, you'll see there's a whole row of different weeds. It's a totally uncultivated area. There's no evidence in the record that anybody ever cultivated anything here.
Well, we're going to have to go through it carefully, obviously. I assume the photographs are up here as part of the
Yes, they're in
evidence.
twice.
Pardon me?
They're in the main appendix.
Okay.
And
We may have to get the real deal, but that's
But
the
if you,
issue.
if you, just speaking to the Commonwealth's argument, there's this argument about cultivation, there's no evidence of cultivation. More, may I just make one other point? I realize I'm running out of
I'll
time.
make it promptly.
If you notice, there is, in the record, in the garage, there were 2 individuals who were found in possession of marijuana in their workspace. And there's evidence in the record that they represented that they rented that facility. And so you have an alternative explanation if you want to accept
Does the
that.
record tell us who they rented the property from?
No. The record simply says that they rented it and that they were found in possession in their workspace, but they were released without identity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Mr. Connolly?
May it please the Court, William Connolly for the Commonwealth. Your Honors, my brothers raised the lack of evidence of cultivation. I call your attention to page 90, appendix page 97, where they were talking about in the back of the woods there was an area of trees cut down, some light, and then we found some small plants, and then it's inaudible like a metal. And then he was asked about Exhibit 20, and that's the one with the metal mesh with the plants under them. The photographs on the record are Xerox copies, they're black and whites.
Are they pretty legible? Well, that's
So-so.
Well, we can get
Judge
the
for yourselves,
originals.
but the originals should be at our office in Fall River District Court. Your Honor, at the
Was there any evidence about cultivating or maintaining or anything of these plants?
The mesh itself is
The mesh.
the opinion of it's fostering the growth, it's protecting the plants from animal destruction. Also, the prosecutor
But no
mentioned-
evidence as to who placed the mesh there?
No, Your Honor. There's no question. This individual lived there, and doesn't have to be the exclusive possessor of the matter or have exclusive control either.
As a kind of a collateral matter, nothing was ever done about this jury issue, I take it. No separate hearing, no findings by the judge?
No,
So
Your
we don't
Honor.
know whether the defendant threatened this juror or didn't threaten this juror?
That, I don't believe there are any charges brought, which leads me to, at the outset, Your Honors, I think that that you would not even reach the issue that we've been talking about, whether the sufficiency of the evidence, because of the fact that my brother consented to the mistrial in the first place, and I cite the Daniels case, which in turn cites Oregon versus Kennedy, and basically where there's consent by the defendant, then there's no bar to, no double jeopardy bar.
But
And that's what
what's your
happened here.
what's your best case as to this defendant having cultivated these plants?
Before you do answer that, we have a case, you say, that when a defendant consents to a mistrial, he can't raise
Double jeopardy.
double
Uh,
jeopardy?
I mentioned-
Well,
I
he
cite
can't
the
raise it-
Daniels-
he
I'm
Can't
sorry.
raise it for the issue that led to the mistrial, but can he raise it for the issue?
Insufficiency.
He's claiming double jeopardy now, and I'm saying
But
that,
because for a different reason.
well, it may be a different reason, but I'm suggesting to the court that you wouldn't even reach the case on the merits, if you
Yeah,
will.
okay. Well,
because
what's the
he's not
best,
entitled to,
Judge Spina said, what's the best case you got?
He lived in an area where it was,
Was that a single-family home?
I'm going to say yes, just for my inference from reading the transcript, I would say yes. Lived on, to use a loose term, a farm. I mean, these plants are everywhere. In particular, hidden from view from the street, behind the building, in an area cleared, first of all, cleared by, the trees were cleared in the area. Plants were being grown, and the growth of which were being
Whoever's
fostered
doing
because
it's
of the...
obviously going to hide the plants. They don't want somebody drive by saying, oh, wow, and calling the police.
Well, this area, the trees were cleared so as to allow light, and you have the mesh covering the plants, so again, cultivating, fostering their growth, and protecting them from animals, animal destruction. And on a probably lesser indication is the prosecutor indicated on page, I think, 123 of the transcript, how green these, and how healthy these plants were, particularly the one under the bathroom window, I guess, compared to the others, but Your Honors can make that determination.
So that's
when
an
you look at
inference, they were cultivated, they were kept watered, and, I don't know, to use
And perhaps-
fertilizer on these things, or what?
Perhaps the color photographs would assist the court better on that. I don't know.
Oh, the photographs downstairs are colored?
The photographs used at the time of trial were colored, and those are not part of the record here. The only Xeroxes were provided as of this point. So it's up to the court.
No, I know it, but the originals are in color?
Yes. So, and there's enough evidence of the intent to distribute by virtue of the
Number of them,
the number of 46 or 47,
value.
and the value indicated by one of the officers of roughly $1,000 per on street value. There's enough there, there was enough there for this case to go to the jury. The trial judge was correct to deny the motion for required finding. The single justice of this court was also correct to affirm that decision, and I would ask that this court likewise affirm the decision of the single justice.
Thank you very much.
All rise. Hearing